theyeshiva.net.
Okay, Daf Beis Amud Beis, around 16 lines from the top. The line starts, Krachim, Hamakafim, Chaim, and Monsey Yeshua Benun, Kairin B'chamisha Asar. So the system, the way the Gemarah comments on a Mishnah is always very organized. The way the Gemarah comments on a Mishnah is always very organized, meaning it will follow line by line after line and analyze each line. So that's why the first Amud of Masechta Megillah analyzed the first line of the Mishnah, that you could read the Megillah on Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, and Tesvav, not less, not earlier, and not later. And the question was, where did you get all these days? 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So 14, 15 is clear in the Megillah. But 11, 12, 13 was not clear, and therefore the Gemarah discussed where did the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah put in the source that you could read it on all these days. And the Gemarah indeed explains that yes, when they made the mitzvahs of Purim, they included in the bylaws that extra law that in some places where there's tiny little groups of Jews, sometimes not even a minyan, right? That's why they can't read, or they don't have a Balkaira, nobody knows how to read, but it's obviously very small villages with very small communities, if there's even a community. There just may be one or two Jews living there. And they also want to celebrate Purim. They also have to celebrate Purim. They made a special time for them. And the Gemarah brought the Psukim, L'kaim Yismei Purim Ha'ela, Bizmanei Hem. There's different times that Purim was established. The days of Purim were established. Everybody has it one day, but it's different the different days. Or Kayamim, Asher Nacha B'Hem HaYehudim Me'aveim. The Rambam in Hilchos Megillah, the laws of Purim, in chapter 1, after he says the law of reading the Megillah, that's how he starts off. He has a very interesting question. He says, Zmanim harbe tiknu chachamim l'kriyas ha-Megillah. That Chachamim established many times for reading the Megillah, meaning they didn't give it one day. They made different dates. That was the kviyas of kriyas ha-Megillah, Zmanim harbe. And that's why it says, Bizmaneihem. There's different Zmanim. That was the focus of the first Amud. Now the Gemarah goes to the next line. The next line tells us that any city, cities that have a fortress, they're surrounded by a wall from the days of Yeshua ben Nun, they read on the 15th of Adar. Now this is a fascinating halacha. How did this come about? Why do these cities have a different day? Why the walls from the time of Yeshua ben Nun? What's all this about? Minohan Emili. How do we know this? A Mishnah can't come up with such a halacha. What's the source for us? Who decided that people who are living in walled cities, walled from the days of Yeshua ben Nun, should be reading the Megillah on a different day, on the 15th of Adar, unlike all other Jewish communities who read it on the 14th of Adar? Okay. So to appreciate the next piece of the Gemarah, we have to see the Megillah inside. Because if not, it's just going to be mumbo-jumbo, and it'll be very hard to appreciate what the Gemarah says. So I'm going to ask you to please open up a Megillas Esther. We are focusing in this sugya on chapter 9, because we're not focusing yet on the story, we're focusing on the institution of reading the Megillah and celebrating Purim. Chapter 9, as we mentioned in the first day that we learned Masechta Megillah, tells us the story about how the Jews fought back their enemies who tried to kill them. Basically, Achashverosh gave them permission for self-defense. It's going to be 660, page 660 in these blue chumash. Achashverosh gave them the right for self-defense, and the Jewish people fought back. They fought back their enemies, and they fought back ferociously. In the capital of the Persian Empire, which was called Shushan, they killed 500 people, including the 10 sons of Haman, who were the vicious anti-Semites of the day. Esther came to her husband, Achashverosh, and she said, I need from you a favor. What's the favor? The favor is Shushan is still filled with people who want to kill Jews. Our lives are still in danger. Allow us tomorrow to continue the campaign. You know how often the United Nations mixes in and doesn't allow Israel to finish a campaign? So all the terrorist bunkers and centers are still intact and they just wait another few months to start. So it's like a doctor who starts surgery and it gets very bloody and he says, you know what, I don't like this blood. We're sewing up the patient. You didn't take out the growth, Chacham. I took out half of it. It's not going to work. It's going to blow up in everybody's face. Just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean you should stop. Esther was a very smart woman. So she said, now it's going to be comfortable for a few months. These people want to kill Jews. Let us finish the campaign. We need another day because we didn't achieve it in one day. You can't always win a conflict in one day. Sometimes it takes 2 days. Sometimes it takes 6 days. Achashverosh gives permission. You just have to understand the Megillah. Esther was a very wise woman. I know it looks good now, but it's not good now because Shushan is simmering with Jew haters. So today they'll be quiet, yeah? In a year from now, who knows what they're going to do? A new pogrom. Pasuk Yud Gimel, Perik Tes, Pasuk Yud Gimel. V'atomer Esther malamelech toiv yinosin gamachal liyudim shabashushan lasas kedas hayoim, and also to hang up the 10 sons of Haman. Yeah, it's interesting. We read the Megillah every year, but we often don't realize the story. Okay, it's one of the values in learning Masechta Megillah. You get to know the story a little bit. What happens in Pasuk Tesvav? They do it the next day. They fight on the 14th of Adar. The original war was Yud Gimel. The second war was Yud Dalet, and they kill another 300 people. And remember, these are not 300 tzaddikim. They go into the houses of 300 Persian saints and kill them. These are people who are standing in the streets and vowing that they're going to nuke all of Israel in one day. Those are the people that they're getting rid of. People of the caliber of Mr. Salamani. You know Mr. Salamani? People of that caliber, that's who they killed. Yes, there are always the feinschmeckers who will condemn Esther for doing this, because these are 300 saints. When you read some of the media in the last few weeks, you could have thought that Mr. Salamani was one of the Lamed Vov Tzaddikim. He's one of the 36 pillars of the world, who was doing Hachnasas Kala all day. He ran from Hachnasas Kala to Moyes Chitim, to Daf Yomi, to Ma'ariv, to More Tzedakah, to More Chesed, to Levayis.
He was a potential candidate for the Democratic Party.
That's funny. But, so you'll always have feinschmeckers. Yeah, a woman told me she can't celebrate Purim. I said, why? Too much violence. Too much violence. 500 people in Shushan, 300 people. We'll soon see a lot of people. Too much violence. She's allergic to blood. I said, what happens if you would know, yeah? That the Einsatzgruppe that came into Ukraine and killed a million Jews, men, women, and children, buried them alive in graves, some of them, and then shot them. And somebody would kill them before they did it. You also wouldn't be able to celebrate Purim. Of course, it's tragic when people die, but they saved the whole Jewish people. They saved innocent women, children from being buried alive in graves in Ukraine and in Lithuania and Belarus. People, you have to have perspective. The Megillah is not a story of blood. It's a story of salvation of innocent people.
Did you convince her?
Huh? I don't know if I convinced her. Depends how indoctrinated she was. I don't know if I convinced her. But you know, you have to have perspective.
Isn't there like some kind of, isn't there like hatzlacha or something that you shouldn't like sing a song against the enemy, like kind of like dance on the enemy's grave?
You're talking about, it says, "B'nefoil oivecha al tismach." When your enemy falls, yeah, don't rejoice. But this is a rejoicing of the fact that you and your children were saved. It's a big simcha. You're referring to a Gemarah that after Kriyas Yamsov, the Malachim wanted to sing. And God said, my creatures are drowning. Ma'aseh yadai tovim bayam, va'atem oimrim shira. Don't sing. God is the one who did the miracle. But it's a tragedy that people have to stoop down to such a moral level and they have to drown. That's a tragedy. Malachim don't say shira. But he never stopped the Jewish people from saying shira. If Jews don't say shira, it's dangerous, because then you could surrender to the false ideology of pacifism, where suddenly the enemy's life is equated with your own children's lives. The Malachim shouldn't say shira. They have to represent a more idealistic world. But when you're living on earth and all of the Egyptians were killed and they tried to kill you, you have to say shira. You have to be thankful. You understand the difference? There's a beautiful word from Rabbi Moshe Leib Sassover. He said, it's a moide de kavart. He said that the Malachim asked Hashem, the Malachim started to say shira. So he says the reason they tried to say Shira is because it says that Sancheriv had an army of 150,000 troops that made a siege on Jerusalem in the times of Chizkiah. And he wanted to attack them, just like he did with the 10 tribes, and they were all exiled. He wanted to do that with Yehuda and Binyamin in Yerushalayim. And it says the night of Pesach, there was an epidemic or a plague, and all 150,000 troops died. So the Malachim came to Hashem before that, and they said, yeah. So the Medrash says, how did they die? What was the epidemic source? The Malachim would say Shira in the morning. They say Shira. Usually we don't hear it. God allowed the Sancheriv's troops to hear it. And when you hear the Shira of Malachim, it's so sweet. Your soul goes out. It's like you melt in the ecstasy of the music and the body can't contain it. So you have Klois HaNefesh. So that's how they died. The death certificate in the hospitals didn't identify that because doctors can only see what doctors can see. But that was the source of it. So the Malachim by Mitzrayim said, what do we have to do a violent death for the Egyptians? Let's do Shira. We'll start singing. The Egyptians will hear the Shira. And then they'll melt away in divinity. What do we need? This raging waters of bodies drowning? It's not, it's nicht edel. Interesting, that's what they said. So the Rebbeinu Shalom answered, Maise yodai toivim bayam va'atam ayim shira. You know what these people did for years? For 86 years, they took Jewish children in the hundreds of thousands and threw them into the water. Maise yodai toivim bayam. They took all my creatures and drowned them in the sea. Va'atam ayim shira. But you want that they should die through spiritual music? That's not fair. That's not fair. Look what they did. They didn't sing Shira if Jewish children should die. Anyway, so that's the point. We don't celebrate the fact that we could kill ever, but we're thankful for the opportunity to save innocent lives. That we're thankful for. There's a very big difference. Very big difference. Okay, so in Shushan they kill 300 people, right? What happens in the other? 500 the first day, 300 the second day. The Salamanis were killed the second day. The Rawanis were killed the first day. It was a small number. Remember, the palace was now very Jewish. Right? The palace was very Jewish. The wife was Jewish. Yeah. Mordechai was Jewish. The palace became, so it was a shtickle matzav over there. There were a lot of Jareds over there. There were a lot of Kushners there. They weren't trying to kill everybody in Shushan. They were trying to kill people who were trying to kill them.
So the 500 was killed.
First day, Yud Gimel, when there was a war everywhere, that ended. The 10 sons were killed, but they were hung on Yud Daled, together with 300 people who were killed because they continued to want to fight against the Jews.
So the 300 they needed special permission.
They could not touch somebody. Yeah. One day they got an extra permission, and it was all self-defense. Because Esther said, we can leave it alone, but the Jews are in danger. That's the issue. What happened in the other countries, in the other regions? So he says in Pasuk Tezayin, 75,000 people. Now you have to remember, Achashverosh Persia was the superpower of the time. He governed 127 provinces, Mehoidu Viat Kush. So there were 75,000 people who were killed. When? On the 13th. And they rested on the 14th, and they made it a holiday. In Shushan, they fought on the 13th and 14th. They rested on the 15th, and they made it a day of feasting and joy. That's the story that ends in Pasuk Yud Ches. You see, Pasuk Yud Zayin tells me about the Jews everywhere else in Achashverosh's empire. Pasuk Yud Ches tells me about the Jews in Shushan. Now comes Pasuk Yud Tes. Pasuk Yud Tes is critical because it's the summation. It's the rabbinic institution. Al Kain. In other words, we finished the story. Now let's discuss the halachic ramifications. Al Kain. HaYehudim aprozim hayoshvim b'arei aprozois oisim esem arba'asar lechodesh adar simcha mishtav yamtiv mishlech manas shlereyu. Therefore, the Jews who are prozim, what does it mean prozim? Jews who are living in unfortified cities, in cities that are open, they celebrate the 14th with joy, with feasting, with a holiday, and with shalach mana, sending gifts. He doesn't finish. You see, he gets cut off in the middle. Al Kain, he doesn't say any. What about Jews living elsewhere? Doesn't say. It's a little bit of a funny pasuk. You see? He says half, finish the sentence. No. Therefore, the Jews in open cities, they celebrate 14. He doesn't continue. Chaf is an interruption. Mordechai wrote down all of these words. He wrote down the whole story. He wrote the Megillah. Then he sends books. He sends letters to all the Jews everywhere. What does the letter say? Take a look at Chaf Aleph. Suddenly, a new clause comes in. L'kayim aleim li'yisosim esyem arba'as l'chodesh adar v'esyem chamisha asar. Suddenly, they're celebrating also the 15th day. These are his letters. He says, Chevra, I want you to celebrate 14 and 15. Just like the days of yore when Jews rested. And we know some Jews rested Yudalit, some Jews rested on Tesvav. I want you to celebrate those days and that month that was transformed from grief to joy, from mourning to holidays. Mishta simcha shalach manas matanas lovyoina. Chav Gimel, the Jews accepted what they began already because they already began partying on their own. You don't need our motto in history is they tried to kill us. We won. Let's go eat. We don't need the Sanhedrin for that. This is part of the Jewish DNA. So this they started on their own, but now Mordechai made it official, even better. No problem. The Kibbutz Yehudim is Asher Chelu Lazat. Veis Asher Kosav Mordechai Aleim. This is the source for the Megillah. They accepted to read what Mordechai wrote. In other words, we're not just going to party and feast and give shalom. We're going to read it. And now they repeat the story again, etc. What? So you see, pasuk. So this is now fine. Pasuk Yotes doesn't say anything about walled cities. It doesn't say anything about Shushan in the halachic ramifications. It doesn't say anything about Yoshua ben Nun. Nothing, right? It does say that Shushan had a different Yom Tif originally, and when it finishes the story, it says Al Kain, and therefore. Al Kain means because of the story. Let's summarize. And what's the summation? Jews in open cities celebrate the 14th. Now, finish the sentence. If you have to finish the sentence, what would you write? And Jews not in open cities don't do the 14th, right? They do the 15th. Clearly, the pasuk doesn't say it, and you have to know why. Like, why can't he just give those few words? But fine. But l'chayda can be deduced. Jews in open cities, the 14th. Not in open cities, the 15th. And we know that it's the 15th because we know that Mordechai said to celebrate 14 and 15. And we know 14 is for one group of Jews. So 15 must be for the other group of Jews. What's the other group of Jews? Jews that are not prozim. They're not in open cities, they're in walled cities. Right? That's how I would read this Megillah, which is logical.
Why make it complicated to begin with? No, because if the threat exists...
What would we do for 3,000 years? I don't understand. Well, he wants to play golf on Sunday morning, go to Costco? I mean, what?
I'm saying when they first
mow the lawn?
When they won the first war, it's still, the threat existed still. So in other words, nothing was complete until the 15th.
Shushan completed it, yeah.
Exactly, so everybody should celebrate on, because nothing was...
That's an interesting question. Why didn't they just make one Purim for whole Klal Yisrael? When everything is done, yeah? Right?
What is the connection between...
Yeah, it's a good question. Why do they have to? It's true. In Shushan, they made a separate day. It's true. They made a separate day originally. That's true. Shushan had a different party. Their schedule was the next day. The Fabrengen was the next day, not the first day. But why in the institution can't they just obliterate the differences and make one mice? Okay, interesting question. Interesting question.
Didn't they help their brothers in Shushan? After they rested, they say, "Oh, Shushan's not finished yet. Let's go help."
I don't know if they had WhatsApp.
What is the connection?
Some say they didn't have WhatsApp. Good question. And what's that to do with Yeshua ben Nun? Where does he come into the picture? You know how many years Purim was after Yeshua ben Nun? He didn't live in the same century. Yeshua ben Nun took in the Jews to Eretz Yisrael in the year 2488, right? 440 years later, the first Beis HaMikdash was built. It stood for 410 years. Okay, so you're dealing already 850 years till the Churban. Then there was 70 years in Galus Bavel. That's 850, so you're dealing with 920. That's when the story of Purim happens. So you're dealing with almost a full millennium after Yeshua ben Nun. 900 and change, almost 1,000 years after Yeshua ben Nun. It's not like, Yeshua ben Nun lived 7 years ago, 10 years ago, so we're connecting it. So now we have a hatzlacha that if my city had a wall in the days of Yeshua ben Nun, even if the wall was destroyed 50 years later, 100 years later, right? It's still up Chaim, and I have to read the Megillah like in Shusha. Fascinating halacha. That's this sugya. So the Gemarah wants to understand minolam. Okay, so now that we have the psukim, please retain the psukim in your mind, because that's going to be the discussion now. The Persian Empire, Iran.
It's a city, modern city of Susa.
They associated with Susa.
Yeah.
I think Mordechai and Esther are buried in Shiraz. Shiraz? You were there? They have the tombstone of Mordechai and Esther. But I think Shushan is associated with Susa, right? Shushan, Susa. At least many associated with. So he says, Minan Mili. How do you know this? Like, how are we getting all of this? Amar Rava said, Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Al Kain Yehudim Aprozim Ayosh from Bari Aprozos. The Jews who are sitting in other Aprozos, V'goimer, finish the pasuk, they make Arba Asur their holiday. The word prozos is a very interesting word. The word for prozos, prozim. What does it mean? What prozos means is, Rashi said earlier on Dav Beis, right? Where did he say what prozim are? Right here, haprozim. It's like the fifth Rashi from the top of the page. Beis Amid Beis haprozim. Ir she'ein l'chayma u'mitoich kach yeshivasa nafutz u'paruz u'meruchakin mishchuna l'shchuna. The word prozim comes from the word paruz, which means separated. Yeah, spread out. We have a similar word, right? The letters are a little changed. Mefaizer in the Megillah, right? Mefuzar or mefaired bein ha'amim, right? Or we have v'karev pizurenu, v'karev pizurenu mi bein hagoyim, pizurenu. Bring us together from our being scattered. When a city has a wall, everybody is cohesive because the wall unites you. When there's no wall, first of all, you could spread out as far as you want, and there's no sense of integration. So Rashi says that's the idea of prozim, yeshivasa nafutz uparuz umurchakim mishchuna l'shchuna. One neighbor, another neighbor are not even connected necessarily. Like you're in Europe, your world, I'm in my world, even though we can get to each other, but there's like this openness that doesn't really connect us. So everyone is in their own orbit. Every neighborhood is in its own orbit, and you could continue to expand and expand and expand. There's nothing limiting you. So that's prozim. So Rava says, "Mi the prozim bar ba'asar mukafin b'chamish asar." You have to finish the pasuk by yourself. I know the pasuk doesn't finish. It's true. The pasuk says Jews in open cities celebrate the 14. Finish it. If the Jews in open cities are celebrating 14, the Jews in non-open cities, Jews in walled cities, are celebrating chamish asar. That's it. How do you know there's a celebration Chamish Shas and maybe there's no? Because it says clearly that Mordechai wrote a letter and asked everybody to celebrate Yudalin and Tesvav. That means there's a celebration Tesvav. For whom? Not for the Jews in open cities. You said they celebrate Yudalin. So you have to use your logic and deduce that the Jews in walled cities do Tesvav. Fine. The Amen maybe Prozim Barbas or Makofin Klalo Klaloi. Now here, you right away see how the Gemarah works. I learned the pasuk and I gave a logical conclusion. It says the Jews in 14, and Jews in open cities do 14. So Jews in not open cities do 15. How do you know that's pshat? Maybe Jews in walled cities don't do it at all. Ve'eimem mukaf prazim barbaso mukafin klal loy. Maybe that's the pshat. Meaning, those who are in mukafim klal loy. He says twice klal. Why did he say klal? Because he heard your question. At all? Yes, at all. You see why he says klal twice? At all? Yeah, at all. Klal loy. But klal not. They just don't do it. They don't make it a yom simcha. Mordechai said. 1 second. Mordechai sent a letter that what? That they should make 15th a day of simcha. I'll tell you what it means. Shushan should do it. But if you're in a walled city, don't do anything. Maybe that's pshat. How could you come up and make a new halacha that Jews in walled cities read the Megillah on the 15th because the Megillah says that in the open cities you read it on the 14th, so it has to be in walled cities you read it on the 15th. Maybe they don't read it. Maybe that's pshat. Only the Yehudim HaPrazim are celebrating Purim. Now, what would even be the logic of this? Interesting. Well, fascinating, right? Fascinating suggestion. Some Jews are not doing it. They're just not doing it. Purim is not for them. They're good. The logic, you might say, would be that Jews in walled cities felt more protected. They felt much more protected. They had real walls, serious walls, yeah? And perhaps they felt more protected, perhaps.
And even if they say the walled city, maybe it says from Hoidu to Kush, from India to Ethiopia, not including Eretz Yisrael. Because from Hoidu to Kush doesn't include Eretz Yisrael.
No, the Persian Empire ruled over Eretz Yisrael at the time. The Middle East was under Achashverosh, yeah. It was under Achashverosh, that's for sure. So the question is, don't make me a new halacha because you're reading the pasuk one way. I could read the pasuk a different way. In open cities, you're Daled. In walled cities, there's no celebration. Tesvav is for the people in Shushan. Because we know that the people in Shushan celebrated the first year Tesvav. Maybe that is Pshat. So the Gemarah says, V'lav Yisrael ninhu. Geschmack answer. Sei nicht Yidden. I don't understand. What are you suggesting such a thing? They're not Yisrael. They're not Jews. You're going to tell me that Mordechai and the Anshe Knesset made a Yom Tov for the Jewish people, but you guys are not in it. We never have such a precedent in Judaism. Ayid is Ayid. Matzah for Pesach for some Jews, Chanukah, some Jews yes, some Jews not. Jews, if it's an institution, lighting Shabbos candles, some Jews yes, some Jews not. Lav Yisrael, no, I don't understand. Is this a serious suggestion that you really believe that some Jews are not part of the Purim celebration? They have absolutely no connection to Purim. V'oid, another issue. Forget the first question. Me'hoidu vat kushksif. It says in Pasuk Chaf and Chaf Aleph that we just read that Mordechai sent books, letters to Jews in all of the provinces of Achashverosh, the close and the far, to observe Purim. In other words, what were the provinces of Achashverosh? From Hoidu till Kush, like it says in the beginning of the Megillah. May Hoidu vat Kush ksif. From Hoidu till Kush. Now, are you going to tell me that from Hoidu till Kush, there was not one city that had a wall? Of course there were cities that had walls. From Hoidu till Kush, 127 provinces. And it says that he sent letters to all the Jews in all those provinces from Hoidu to Kush. It never says that he excluded the Jews that lived in city walls. So both from logic, that they're part of Klal Yisrael, and from the psukim of the Megillah, this idea is refuted. Okay, so if that's the case, Rav is right, that if you live in a walled city, you have to do it on the 15th. Okay, but we're not done yet. Remember, to determine truth, you always have to exclude every possibility. Because if there's another possibility, you're not sure that this is the right way. Maybe there's another way of looking at it. So the Mishnah would have not be justified to say a halacha when the Megillah could be reinterpreted in a different way. That's why the Gemarah is going to go through every possible way of interpreting these psukim to figure out who gave the Mishnah the intellectual right and the integrity to determine that this is the halacha. From the Megillah, you don't necessarily see it until we're going to root out every possibility. I'm mentioning all these things before I ask questions because I want you to understand the rhythm of how the Gemarah works. It's not like the Gemarah is trying to ask questions. Yeah? The Gemarah is not trying to ask questions. The Gemarah is trying to determine the absolute truthfulness of the words of the Mishnah based on the Megillah. Ve'ema prozim bar bisar. Maybe I have another option for you. The open cities do the Megillah on the 14th. That says in the Megillah. No arguing that. Mukafin bar bisar b'chamisar. If you're in a walled city, you do it both. And I'll prove it to you. Kediksiv, it says in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, Mordechai asked them and he told them, Lias oisim es yoyim arba asa l'chodesh adav es yom chamisha asa boy b'chol shana v'shana, to celebrate the day 14 and 15, which sounds like there are people that do both days. And I'll tell you why. Makes a lot of sense. Certain Jews should do Purim 2 days. You know why? Because Shushan celebrated Yudalit, even though they had to fight, but they were still celebrating on some level, and they celebrated Tesvav. So somebody should make a commemoration for what happened in Shushan. And if Shushan was a walled city, and these are walled cities that are compared to Shushan, maybe they should celebrate 2 days, which of course would change the halacha. It means that if I'm in a walled city, I have to read the Megillah, Yudalad, and Tesvav. So when Mordechai said Jews should celebrate Purim 2 days, he meant 2 days, that there are some places you do it 2 days, not 1 day. And that's a whole different interpretation in the halacha. Maybe that's pshat. In other words, open cities, 14. That's clear. No argument. It says that in the Megillah. Walled cities, not 15. 14 and 15. Again, we're back to that ambiguous pasuk that said, if you live in Prozim, you do 14. If you live in walled cities, it doesn't say what to do. So we're suggesting 15. The Gemarah says, no, 14 and 15. Liyas Eisim is Shnei Yamim. Liyas Eisim Yom Arbas and Yom Chamish Asar. So the Gemarah says, look at Mordechai's words, and this is so critical about how to say a sentence, okay? I could say the same sentence in 2 ways. Let's look at what he said in Pasuk Chaf Aleph, and let's look at what he could have said. In Pasuk Chaf Aleph, he says, L'kayem aleim, this is the text of the letter, L'kayem aleim liyos oisim es yoim arbasa l'chaydesh adar ve'es yom chamish asar b'chol shana v'shana. He put in a word es between day 14 and day 15 to interrupt it. He could have said, I want you to celebrate day 14 and 15 every year. That would have sounded, make a 2-day holiday, day 14 and 15. Liyas oisim, yoim arba'asar v'yom chamish asar. Very nice. He puts in an S. An S is, I want you to celebrate day 14. And there is another celebration of day 15. If he would have said day 14 and 15 without a break, this would be matching with your theory, with what you postulated. But that S grammatically was unnecessary in that pasuk. It would have been very nice to say day 14 and 15, was very clear. But then he knew it would have meant some people celebrate 2 days. I'm saying, no, I'm asking you to celebrate day 14, ve'es. And now there's another celebration, an alternative Purim on day 15. Hani bar basa v'hani b'chamish. There are groups celebrating 14, there are groups celebrating 15. If so, I'm back to square one. Rava was right. Since the Jews living in the open cities are celebrating 14, so now I need a group to celebrate 15. Who? The Jews that are not living in the open cities. What? I'm done. No, you would think that we settled the case, right? Not with Jews. We did not settle anything. No, let's do a new one. Prazim bar bisser. Okay, let's go back. The open cities will do 14. Mukafin, the fortresses, maybe pshat is to have a choice. Choose 14, choose 15. That's maybe pshat. I'm not telling you to do 2 days. That we refuted because S. But maybe it's an option. If you want, you can associate it with the rest of, you can associate yourself with the rest of Klal Yisrael, right? And do it on the 14th. If you want, you have a special day. You could do it 15, like Shushan, like they did it in Shushan the first year. Maybe that's pshat. Again, the pasuk doesn't end, doesn't give the second half. So it's open for interpretation. Who told you that you could make a fixed halacha that they have to do it on 15? Maybe it's open for choice. Maybe that's pshat. Omar Kra, no, a good option. We're going to go back to that pasuk that we already spoke about on Amud Aleph. This is pasuk Lamed Aleph. Omar Kra lekayim es yemeya Purim ha'ela bizmaneihem. They sent letters to the Jews to observe the days of Purim in their times. Zmanoi shel zeh, loi zmanoi shel zeh. From here we learn that the time of one Purim is not the time of the other Purim, meaning the time of Purim in Mukafim Chayma is not the time of Purim in Prozim. Everyone has a separate time. Like we learned before on Amud Aleph, there are distinctive times, and your time is not my time. I cannot celebrate Shabbos, either Shabbos or Sunday. We may have 2 different days for Purim, but they're not interchangeable. Zmaneihem, there are different zmanim. And therefore, there's no option that the Mukafim could make read the Megillah on 14. Okay, great. Settled? Chas v'shalom. Nothing is settled. As we say, it's not over until it's over, and it's not over yet. Okay, all I know is that Jews in walled cities are not supposed to read on the 14th, but the pasuk never says when they should read. I have been assuming it's 15, right? But it doesn't say that. I have a new option. Ve'ema b'tleiser. Maybe if you're living in a walled city, you should actually do the Megillah on the 13th of Adar. In other words, open cities 14, yeah? Walled cities 13, because the pasuk doesn't say when. It says Mordechai said they should celebrate 14 and 15. Shushan. The Jews in Shushan are 15 because they celebrated the first time 15. So this would be a completely new option, and it would mean that there are 3 dates of Purim lechatchila, besides the villages.
Now what is it to celebrate before it's over? Before they kill the people? Why does it say 13? How does it fit? There's no cause for celebration.
Yes, I vote yes. So the option based here is Shushan 14-15 and
Shushan itself, the Jews in Susa, 15. Only them. They have their own Purim. Jews in open cities, Jews in New York, Jews in Los Angeles, Jews in Tel Aviv, Jews in Yafo, Jews in Haifa, Jews in unwalled cities, Yud Daled. Jews in walled cities, Yud Gimel, because they have to celebrate Purim. The Megillah doesn't give them a date, but the Megillah says they don't do it on Yud Daled because they're not living in open cities. So maybe Tleis, or maybe 13. That's the question.
It's not a good question. What are you celebrating now?
That's right.
Celebrating that they are going to kill them.
You want to know why we would choose Yud Gimel when it was a day of Milchama. And Purim was celebrated for the day of Menucha, not for the day of Milchama. That's your question, right?
Yes.
Right. So the Ritva says that it's not a viable question. It's just to bring out the answer. It's like almost like you can't say this, and you can't say this, and you can't say this, and you can't say this. That's the Ritva's perspective. But there's another perspective. Of course, just as the Gemarah doesn't let go from options, the Rishonim also don't let go from options. Only Kriyas and Megillah. Right. But the question is, why would that even be Yud Gimel?
Wasting space in the Gemarah by asking that question. It was just to clarify.
Really, the question is a very profound question. And for this, we have to understand a little bit of the history of the time and the psychology of the time. And you're getting excited because I said the word psychology. But I mean, in all sincerity, if you understand the history and the psychology of the time, and then we can understand the question of the Gemarah. So the Ritva Taka has a perspective that it's just for Shakla V'Tarya. But there's also another perspective. And I'll say it Bekitzer very briefly. It has to do with a much bigger question. And the bigger question is how Yehoshua ben Nun comes into this whole picture. It's a very strange phenomenon. Okay? Where does Yehoshua ben Nun come into this? Even a bigger question. Why are people in walled cities distinguished from other Jews? Let's say Shushan had a wall. So what? Let's say I was living in China, inside the China wall, okay? It's Purim. I want to celebrate Purim. They say, oh, you can't celebrate on your Daled. You know why? Because Shushan has a wall. So what? Because I have a wall, I become Shushan? I don't know. And if Shushan has a Chinese restaurant, and I have a Chinese restaurant, so I become like Shushan? I don't understand. Shushan, they celebrated Tesvav. Why? Because they rested on Tesvav. So if I'm living in China with a wall, that's why I should make Purim. What's the logic here? Wall. Okay. And what if they sell red cars in Shushan? They sell red cars in my cities. I should also make Purim on a different day. If you're going to tell me that in my city they also rested on Tesvav, fine. But that's not the case. Only in Shushan. So what, Shushan shouldn't be lonely? They felt the Jews shouldn't be lonely. They said, let's find wherever there's a wall and let's do them also. We take these things for granted. Oh, Shushan had a wall. Wherever there's a wall. Why? Wherever there's a public telephone, it's like Shushan?
Maybe the Goyim, when they made Milchoma, first was easier to conquer everybody else. And at the end, do the rest.
So the pshat is, of course, it's not stam. The Jews in walls felt much more secure during the decree. Yerushalayim's wall was destroyed then, because the Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it already 70 years earlier. Yerushalayim didn't have a wall. Yerushalayim, they felt vulnerable. But wherever Jews felt walls, let me give a little bit of a contemporary example. There were many Jews who felt, during certain situations that because they're secular and assimilated, they won't be affected by the anti-Semitism. Right? A lot of Jews in Germany and Vienna felt, they're not the Oist Juden. The Oist Juden, the Eastern Jews, are dirty and frum and filthy and poor, and the Goyim hate them. But we're the sophisticated German musicians and poets. We're intermarried. We don't believe in anything. We're going to be accepted. Of course, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, right? The Ramban says this, that the Jews in the walled cities, they weren't so affected by the ganze Maisa. They're like, we're good. We're good. We're not so vulnerable. When Ezra made Aliyah for Bayis Sheni, he took only 42,000 Jews. He sent a letter to the Jews of Germany to come up. And they wrote back and they said, you go to your Yerushalayim, we will stay in our Yerushalayim. Berlin. Meshech Chachma, Reb Meir Simcha, Parshas B'chukoisai, this is the 1920s, discusses how Jews turned Europe into a new Yerushalayim. They think Berlin is Yerushalayim, Vienna is Yerushalayim, Vilna is Yerushalayim. The 1920s. There's only one Yerushalayim. But the Jews in the walled cities, of course, they were in a delusion. Because when you hate Jews, they'll get into the wall. They'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. Armies have breached walls, even if they were thick walls. Yerushalayim had a big wall, and what happened? It was a protection, but not for long. For a good few months. So the Ramban says that the Jews in Mokafim Chaima, they did not celebrate Purim the way the other Jews celebrated it. L'poil, all Jews were saved, Baruch Hashem. But the Jews in the open cities, they felt the simcha very strongly. So even before the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah made an official Yom Tov, they were feasting and partying. That's why the Pasuk doesn't finish the second half. It's not Stam, Mordechai decided I don't have any more ink, let me cut out. No. Every emission in Torah is part of the story. This is a klal. In Tanakh, when it doesn't say something, it also says. You understand? It's like in music, lahavdil, the pauses are essential to the music as much as the notes. When a pasuk doesn't finish, it's trying to tell you something. The second half of the celebration is not so pashut. Because the Jews in the walled cities, they were happy for their brethren, but there's a big difference between being happy for your brethren and being happy for your own kids. You know what I mean? And not because you're a bad person, just because, it's your own corner. There was an attack in Pittsburgh, there was an attack in Poway, there was an attack in Jersey City, right? But when were the residents of Monsey frightened? Not from Poway. Why not? It's also our brothers and sisters. Everybody knows that. Not that they didn't care, chas v'shalom. I don't mean that. But everybody knows when it happens next door, 47 Forshay. Everybody locked the doors. Everybody was traumatized or at least triggered in very powerful ways because it's your next door neighbor. We understand that, the psychology of that. They're in the walled cities, they looked at it very differently. But Megillah, their celebration of Purim was not the same. So when the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah now made Purim a holiday, you see why the Gemarah made a suggestion that the Jews in the walled cities don't have Purim? Klal, because they knew how they were feeling. And the question is, do they really deserve to have Purim? If there's no Imay Anoichi B'tzara, if you weren't there with me in the tragedy, can you be there with me in the celebration?
sad tragedy. They were fighting.
True.
Not on such a big scale.
Not on such a scale, yeah. Not on such a scale. My brother told me he wanted to start an organization, and he went to a big philanthropist to ask him for money. So he said, it's good you came to me before you're opening the organization. Because the rule in life is that people take off on an airplane on their own, but then they want me to join them for the landing. If you want me to be with you for the landing, you take me with you for takeoff. You want to be there for the landing? Where were you for takeoff? Oh, takeoff you don't want. You just want for the party at the end. Doesn't work that way. The Gemarah excludes that. They're part of Klal Yisrael. The Exile was on them. So don't exclude them. It's not fair. That's very unfair. But the psychology, the emotions were different. So B'meila, when the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah made the Yom Tiv, they did something very interesting. They put the Jews who were in prozim, vulnerable, they gave them the day of Yudalit. Yeah. What about Tesvav? Tesvav, they gave for the Jews of Shushan because they did Tesvav. But here something very special happened. And this is an incredible observation. Here we see how the Chazal of the generation, how they thought. The Yerushalmi says this, the Rambam says it in Hilchas Megillah, and the Ramban, the Rashba, they all discussed this. And there was a tragedy at the time. What's the tragedy? This is how you see how Jews thought. Jews were on top of the world, okay? The president, his name was Achashverosh, the king. Okay? The first lady, yeah, was a tzaddikus. It wasn't even an Ivanka. It was an Esther Hamalka, Mamish Tzaddikus. Yeah, you can't get better. The prime minister, the vice president, the man right under the king was who? Mordechai, a Talmid Chacham, the head of the Sanhedrin, a tzaddik, yeah, Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. You can't get better. You can't get better. Yeah. But there was still one problem. It's not good. It's not the Geula. This is not Mashiach. Achashverosh is a nut job. Achashverosh is a drunk. Achashverosh is an anti-Semite. The Gemarah says he hated Jews as much as Haman. He was surrounded by the right people, but he was at Sidreta, and he was an insecure, paranoid, tippish, as the Gemarah says. This is not Jews like euphorias, unbelievable. It was not. That's not the place of Jews. It was a beautiful thing. It was a miracle, but it's not the ultimate destiny of the Jewish people. So when they made Purim, they had their eyes on Eretz Yisrael. What was the matzav in Eretz Yisrael? Desolate, destruction. All the cities with the old walls from Yeshua ben Nun were all gone. Why were they gone? Because Nebuchadnezzar destroyed everything. So all the glorious cities of Eretz Yisrael that had big walls that protected Jews for hundreds of years were now in ruins. So the Chazal did something very, very special. They did not want to put Shushan as the pinnacle of Jewish existence in the capital of Persia without giving honor and respect to Eretz Yisrael. But Eretz Yisrael was destroyed at the time. So they made a fascinating takana. And the takana is that Shushan is going to get Tesvav. Every city that had a walled city from the time of Yeshua ben Nun, even though now it was destroyed, is going to be considered as though it has a wall now. Because if it would have not been that way, you would say, oh, a walled city from the time of Achashverosh gets Tesvav. Yerushalayim is out. It's a churban. Yericha is out. It's a churban. All the other Makofas Chaim are out. It's a churban. And everybody would remember Eretz Yisrael, it used to be our home. Persia, this is our new home. New York, Los Angeles, Rockland County, Chicago, Toronto, Teaneck, these are our new homes. Look at our beautiful homes. We have chaimas with gardens, with deer, with coyotes, with farms, with evergreens, and etc. With ice cream shops, with pizza shops, with nice shiurim and video cameras and tents and coffee and soup, yeah? Those stuff's to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, that's the old destroyed place. They wouldn't do that. Extraordinary. No. Shushan is going to be paired together with a city that has a chayma mimoisya Yeshua ben Nun. Now there's nothing there. It has a chayma. Doesn't have a chayma. It's a joke. Yerushalayim has nothing. Halachically, in our vision, we live with Yeshua ben Nun. If it had a chayma then, we still regard it as a place of a Chaim. You see how they did this? They didn't make it on the same day like the Purim. The Purim had a unique Yom Tov. They celebrated on their own before the Mukafim. When they made a Purim, they decided not only to include Shushan and Tesvav. They taka deserved Tesvav because they had a special Yom Tov. But they decided to include all the cities in Eretz Yisrael with Shushan. So Shushan now became an extension of Yerushalayim, of other cities in Eretz Yisrael. In other words, Golus has to be an extension of Eretz Yisrael, not a separate substitute for Eretz Yisrael. That is what they were. This is the thought process, the way the Rishonim understand. Now you'll understand the question. If this is the case, that the Jews who were Mukaf weren't even celebrating so much, right? So the Jews of Shushan should make Tesvav. Maybe the Mukafim should get a special day for Kriyas HaMegillah. You know which day? Yud Gimel. What happened on Yud Gimel? The day of war. That's exactly when they should read the Megillah. They should read the Megillah on the day that all their brothers were fighting in self-defense, trying to protect the Jewish people. That should be their day. Because you can't give them the day of the Purim, because you want to celebrate the Purim separately because of their special experience. Shushan gets Tesvav. Mukafim are also part of Klal Yisrael. So maybe their Kriyas HaMegillah was especially on their own day, the Yom HaMalchama, which is actually effective because it's the day that they have to reflect on the fact this is not just a drinking party, Purim. This is not just a party of Haman Tashin and Shalach Manas. There's Jews who fought a bloody war. That should be their day of Kriyas HaMegillah. Because the Pasuk doesn't say when they should read the Megillah.
The cities that were Mukafim, it's not Yeshua ben Nun. Were they Mukafim because of what the Yidden built? Or were they Mukafim?
Either. No difference. If when Yeshua ben Nun went into Eretz Yisrael, they were Mukaf, for Purim, they have a status of Mukafim Chayma. And therefore they read on Tesvav. What happened? That way, the Rambam says, Aloshan litein kavod la'Eretz Yisrael. It's respect for Eretz Yisrael. Or some Rishonim give a lashon not to look at Eretz Yisrael as a destroyed, desolate country. In our imagination, we can watch the Chaim in Yerushalayim. How? Because we're reading the Megillah on Tesvav. But there's no Chaim. We still live with that Chaim of the past and the Chaim of the future. So Yisozia, Anshe Knesset Agdoila, they were in Chutz La'aretz, but their eyes were on the eternity of Jewish history. They never got swallowed up in the temporary intoxication of a nice king in Golos.
So it's interesting. They were not fixated on the future, because they could have said, in the future, whoever will have a wall will celebrate Shushan.
Yeah.
They were actually fixating on the past.
Yeah.
Well, so
Yeah.
That Meraglim, the Moshe Rabbeinu told the Meraglim that a kafa is a sign of weakness, no? Sign of spiritual weakness.
He told Moshe to see if the cities are fortified or not fortified. He doesn't say what he means. Rashi says that he gave them a siman, that if there's no walls, they're probably confident in their own strength. And if there's walled, they're not confident. It's not a contradiction, because b'poyel mamish, when you're not confident, you build a wall so you could become confident. Yeah, you could become confident.
And that's why they needed the special focus on it. Because
they need a special focus. And then they put them, the question is, would they put them in the category of Shushan? Maybe not, because where did they feel the Gzeira most? In Shushan. Ha'ir Shushan Avoicha. So maybe the Mukafim actually don't deserve to get Shushan's holiday, just like they don't deserve to get the Purim's holiday. Maybe 13 is the right day for them. Actually 13. The day of war. So the Gemarah answers and says, you have a point, but since the Pasuk doesn't say which day for the Mukafim, so the Gemarah answers with one word, Kishushan. It's logical to say that they get the same day of Shushan. Why? Because the Megillah mentions 2 days, Yudalad and Tesvav. The Megillah mentions that the Mukafim have a separate day. We don't know which. So we say it's Kishushan. What says it's Kishushan? It's like a Shushan. And there's a reason for it. Shushan was a city that had a wall during the time of Purim. So now we take a city that has a wall and we look at all the cities that don't have a wall, but used to have a wall when Jews entered into Eretz Yisrael in their original glory, and we put the two together. And we say the wall of Shushan is an extension of the invisible walls of Yeshua ben Nun. That's what we're doing, Keshushan. And that gives memory to Eretz Yisrael, a zikaron to Eretz Yisrael, a respect to Eretz Yisrael, and a vision of Eretz Yisrael, not as a desolate place in ruins, even though that was the physical reality of Eretz Yisrael. Please remember the next shir is Wednesday. The next shir is Wednesday, 7:45. No, this was a shir especially for you. And it läuft von Amerika. Fortgesund, Edel, ein Pseudos Teves. We should follow you there because of Mamish.
I'm going away. I'm going to be back next month.
Okay. Wo fahrt ihr?
Phoenix,
Arizona. Okay. Ein B'shah Tova Matzlachas.
Why are they pointing out the Shia Benin? Why didn't they just say?
Why what?
They're saying the name Shia Benin. Could have been just.
Why Yeshua ben Nun?
It's at the time of the Eden in Eretz Yisrael. What? It sounds like they want to point something out.
Why Dafka Yeshua ben Nun?
Yeah.
That's an excellent question. Say from when Jews entered into Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah.
Good question. The answer is, you hear the Barney's asking, why mention Yeshua ben Nun? Just say it had a wall when the Jews entered into Eretz Yisrael the first time. The answer is, who was the first man to fight Amalek? Yeshua. In Parshas B'Shalach, when Amalek declared war against the Jewish people, so Moshe told Yeshua, right, P'char lanu anoshim v'tzei v'hilachem ba'Amalek. So Purim is the continuation and the defeat of Amalek. So they made a special tribute to Yeshua ben Nun, who was the one who started the war against Amalek, who was the grandfather of Haman. That's what the Rishonim say. Beautiful diuk. And it's another reason why Dafka the times of Yeshua ben Nun, because he was the one he began the Purim story, so to speak. In other words, the Purim is just a continuation of Yeshua ben Nun.
Someone were focusing on giving credit.
Covered Eretz Yisrael, and not to look at Eretz Yisrael as the destroyed Nebuch place that used to be a nice place, but now we have America, Iran, America. America is Git. We thank Hashem for merit, it's a Malchus Shel Chesed, but it's Golus. It's nicht Malchus Beis David, it's nicht Mashiach. It's nicht Geula, it's Golus. It's a nice Golus, but it's Golus.
Like we say now, we have Trump. They were them. We have a chesed. They were excited.
Yeah, I didn't want to say the name, but you understood the matzah. You understood the matzah. And it doesn't mean that you're not grateful and you're not thankful. You're thankful every day. Thankful every day for Malchus Shel Chesed. But you have to know, as Achashverosh is nicht Mashiach. Achashverosh is nicht Mashiach. It's a shene Zach, it's a feine Zach. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once said it, Purim Fabrengen. Vayihi is Lashon Tsar. They say the Gemarah Megillah. Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh. He said it was a nice time. Alles is given good. Ketzayin nish v'yish. He said, aber sinisht Malchus Beis David. B'mei Achashverosh doesn't that Tsar. Either Amos says Achashverosh is Oisius Acharis v'reishus Shaloi. It's a mashal for Hashem. He says, this is the problem. As the Shem Hashem is in Rosh Teves, Soife Teves, Gematrias. He says, but Begoli is Achashverosh. The Eberst is a Rosh Teves, a Sofi Teves, a Gematria, and I've gefin, and here, there. Aber was is Begoli Achashverosh? But from the Baditchever, he said that the problem is, Gan Eden and Gehenim, you put over there in heaven, and the Teves Elam Haza, you put here, yeah? If you would have taken the Teves Elam Haza and put it in Reishis Chachma, and Gan Eden and Gehenim, you would have put here, Volt Altsgewen Git. Yeah. Reishis Chachma is in Reishis Chachma. The Teves ain't in das, so it doesn't number das. So the Achashverosh is Achashverosh. Acharis, Reishis, Shaloi, Gematrias, Remozim, Soife Teves. It's Alts Behel. Das is the Tsar. Vahanim Shul Muven. Everybody have a wonderful day. Shachris. It's a good shaila. Why not make one Yom Tov for everybody? We'll get to that. Right. So put in the mamish. Why do you have to divide Klal Yisrael? We have enough problems, you say. It's a good shaila. You're asking on the whole matzav. Why Bechlal make different things? Okay, we'll get to it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure having you. Does as Gemarah can sein Geschmack? Gemarah is a Geschmack Sefer. Man weiß, wie zu lernen ist. Es ist ein Geschmack Sefer.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net shul.org/donate.